Hello everyone, welcome to Native Jungle for CCNA routing and searching. Let's begin. Today we will discuss and configure the static routing. What is routing? So routing means it can provide the path to understand the destination. It can be classified into two types. One is the static routing, another one is the dynamic routing. So static routing is by network admin to configure manually in the router. Manually configured. So I will manually configure the destination networks. The security will be improved. It uses less bandwidth compared to the dynamic routing, because dynamic routing to understand the path uses the bandwidth utilization, but while configuring the static routing there is no use of bandwidth and CPU cycles. No CPU cycle utilization for static routing. We can see the static routing in four types. First one is the standard static routing. Standard static routing. Second one is the default static routing. Third one is the floating static routing. Fourth one is the summary static routing. By usually static routing can be classified into four categories: standard static routing, default static routing, then floating static routing, and summary static routing. Let's see one by one. First one, standard static routing. So SR means static routing. For example, if there are three routers, so this is the cable to connect it between the router. Here LAN segment, here LAN segment, here another one LAN segment. For example, 192.168.1.1, then 192.168.2.1, here 2.2, likewise 3.1, 3.2. So what is the static routing means? For example, the user wants to send the traffic to this LAN segment, but we need to configure the standard static routing by using this command ip-route. So IP means that is the IPv4, route means that is the path. First I need to write the syntax, then destination network followed by submask. Submask is very important parameter to configure every network. If you misconfigure the subnet mask, it will have the, and as well as an gateway of IP address. That is the exit gateway IP address. You can type the IP address or interface. This is the, let us assume this is the R1 router, this is the R2 router. Let's take the scenario. Here 172.16.1.0. For example, the user wants to send the traffic from R1 to R2 LAN networks. We need to configure the standard static routing IP route. What is the destination network? 172.16.1.0. Subnet is /24. So we need to configure correct subnet 255.255. Next one is the exit gateway. So exit gateway is this gateway. The IP address of that exit gateway address 192.168.2.2. This standard static routing we need to configure the R1 router. For example, R2 LAN networks configure to access the R1 LAN network, they need to exit gateway address 3.1. This is the way we need to configure the standard static routing. So destination network followed by subnet mask. Then R1 router exit the gateway interface is 2.2. For R3 router, the exit gateway IP address is the 3.1. Next, we need to understand the default static routing. Second one is the default static routing. Default static routing. Default static routing is nothing but so R1, R2, R3. If you configure the default static routing means the command is IP route 0.0.0 then exit gateway 2.2 192.168. This is the syntax and command for default static routing. So any network for example R1 users can search any website or any traffic from any network will be forwarded to the next hop using default static routing. So it does not know the exact destination. That's why we need to configure the 0.0.0.0 0.0.0.0. Mostly we need to configure this static routing, default static routing in ISP router towards. Next one is the floating. Next one is the floating static routing. So floating static routing is the static route that is used to provide the backup path to the primary static routing. The floating static routing is only used when the primary route is not available. For example, you have the router in your organization. There is the LAN networks, multiple VLAN networks in the inside organization. You have the purchased for the internet from the ISP vendor. There are two routes are available. This is the one ISP router. Then the another one is the another vendor of the ISP router. For example, this is one the Airtel. This is one is the Tata. You need to configure the two static routes. IP route. By default in ISP router, we need to configure the default static route 0.0.0, 0.0.0. Then Airtel interface IP address. Which one is the primary? It does not. You need to configure the administrative value. Then backup path. That is the floating static routing. Same command 0.0.0. Then Tata IP address. What is the difference between the default static routing and floating static routing? Here you can give the priority which one is having the higher bandwidth. You can give the priority 1, then lower bandwidth is 2. For example, you purchase for 1 Gbps for Airtel, 250 Mbps means you can give the priority Airtel is 1, then Tata. After this command IP address, you give the command 1, then Tata is 2. That's why you take the lower value having the first priority. So Airtel becomes the first priority and higher value is the second priority. For example, if the Airtel route is failure means then all the traffic from the LAN network, all the traffic will pass through the Tata. This is the floating static routing. Also we can possible to configure the standard static routing also. So this is the redundancy for failover configurations. If multipath to the destination exit, the router will choose the lower administrative distance. It can forward the default traffic to the routes. Then last one is the summary static routing. Summary static routing is nothing but it combines the static routes. For example, in your network, the destination network can be 172.160.1.0 followed by submask /24. There are two networks are available, 172.160.2.0 followed by same subnet. In the R1 router, it can reduce the lookup table by combining the submask 0.0/22. So instead of /24, it can reduce the lookup table to forward the traffic. It having the we can use the another one router also 172.3.0. So this is the one destination, this is the second one destination, this is the third one destination. So it can summarize then combined lookup table IP address is the 172.16.0.0. You can search from the subnet calculator. It can coverage the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, then 0.0. It is the summary static route. By default calculate the router by itself. It can reduce the number of lanes in the routes in the router. Let's take the practice on configuring the static route using Cisco Packet Tracer. Let's configure the routing. Here I need to take the 3 routers. I use the 5 LAN segment. First Ethernet. Just a minute. I need to take the switch also. To turn off the router, I need to add the serial interface. During the power on time, we cannot add the interface card. Now we add the serial cable between this. Here I need to type the IP address 192.168.1.0.0/24. Here I need to use the 172.16.1.0 2.0 then 3.0. We use the 5 LAN segments. You can differentiate the color for understanding purpose. This one LAN segment, this one LAN segment, then this is the another LAN segment, this is one LAN segment, this is the one LAN segment. I already told we can use the top-down approach. Sorry, bottom to top approach. 192.160.1.3 followed by submask. Then gateway is the 192.1.1. Followed by 250.250.250.0. Mostly we can mistake the submask. You can correctly configure the submask in every in devices also, as well as the router interface. This is the 3.2 submask 172.16.3.1. Now we configure the end devices for the IP address. Then go to the, or simply you can go to the Gigabit Ethernet interface G0/0. This is the MAC address. You can go see for your 192.160.1.1 followed by submask. Then port will be on. Opposite side serial interface G0/0/0. I can configure 192.160.2.1 followed by submask. Then I can turn on the interface. 2.1 is the left side and 2.2 is the this router. Which interface? Serial interface 0. Yeah, you can see the port interfaces are, or I need to configure the CLI mode because 172.16.1.1 followed by submask. No showdown command to turn on the interface. By using 2.2, here 1.2, here 2.2. Then last router, enable, go to the global configuration mode, hostname R3, interface G0/0, IP address 172.16.3.1, followed by submask serial interface 0/1, here 2.1. So opposite side having the 2.2, here 2.1. R3 router, then we can modify the name, hostname R2. So same scenario can be used for the dynamic routing protocols. You can recall the same scenario. By default, this is the R1 router, this is the R2 router, this is the R3 router. By default, it can only learn the what are the connected interface. So totally 5 networks: R1, R2, R3 routers. Only it can understand the directly connected network interface. So directly connected network means the administrative value is 0. Here R1 left side, right side, there are 2 networks are available. R2, so there are 3 networks are connected. R3 also left side, right side having the 2 network address are identified. So it need to know the 3 networks, it need to know the 2 address, it need to know the 3 address. We can configure the one by one in routing. How to verify the commands means just a minute. So IP route, this is the basic command for every network admin. (192.160.1.0) the gigabit Ethernet 0/0 1.0. So this interface is going the network 2.0 via serial interface. This is the outgoing. Next networks, we need to configure the one by one. So just wait. Here R2 router, I can start from R2 router. That's why I can classify the I can explain the 4 static routes. Here I need to configure the standard static routing. Don't forget, here I configure the standard static routing. Standard static routing is nothing but we need to configure the exact destination network in the routing table. Here the administrative know, so 192.1.0 it going via 2.1. Then first I need to configure the IP route 192.160.1.0 followed by submask. Then it going which interface? For example, this LAN network going to this path. So this is the interface is the 192.160.2.1. You can check the ping from the PC2. Ping dot 192.160.1.3 is the first time it got failed. Sorry, it need to know the opposite side. Once we configure all the routes, then For example, the user want to send the traffic. The user want to send the traffic via this interface means to access the which network 172.16.3.0 followed by submask. Then exit IP is the 172.116.2.2. Sorry, if you misconfigure the router, this is the router IP address, so 2.1. This is the configuration for the standard static routing. So IP route to verify the here 172.16.3.0 via 2.1, then 192.1.0 via 192.160.2.1 networks. Next, summary static routing. So IP route. So what are the networks are does not know. So IP route, it claimed this network address, this network address. So one, it does not know the 172.1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So you can configure the standard static routing. Sorry, summary static routing. You can configure the IP route 172.16.1.0 followed by submask. Then exit gateway IP address is the 2.2. By default, all the traffic going through this interface only. 192.160.2.2, then followed by 2, followed by 3. So all the 3 networks, it can transmit via this interface only. This is the exit interface. After that, you can save the configuration. So IP, you can see the lookup table 172.1.0, 2.0, then 3.0. So all the networks can be summarized. I already explained the example 172.16.0.0/24. It is subnetted using the 3 subnets. Is going this interface. The last one is the default static routing. IP route 0.0.0. It does not know the exact destination network, so we need to type the default static route to the ISP router towards 2.2. Yeah. So default static routes, it can source the S star candidate default. Here this is the default route parameter. S is the static route. Standard static and candidate is the default. This is the default static routes. Now we check the routing table and send the traffic to understand the path. For example, R1 in the 172.16.1.3. Yeah, you can see the traffic. I able to reach the 1.2, 1.3, then 3.3. it takes time to understand the path. Now we check all the configurations, all the endpoints. It is reachable. So previously it is not reachable. Now you can see 1.3 is the ping 192.160.1.3. This is the default static route. So I can configure the default static route for this router. Default static route. Here I configure the standard static route. Here I configure the floating summary route. So last one is the this is the summary static route. Floating summary route is the we can need to configure the administrative distance by giving the value higher value. So I can just type the commands, but it is not possible. There are two nodes are needed. IP route 0.0.0 0.0.0, then 172.16.4.0 followed by, but this network is not connected. Just a minute. For example, able to connect the one interface, so 4.1 then 4.2. If this path is failure, then automatically the traffic will be passed through this interface. This is the router we connected to the 2 ISP vendor in the real-time mode. I hope you can understand the static routing concept and different types, then how to configure the standard static routing, default static routing, and summary static routing, and floating standard static routing. Let's see on next jungle video. Please like and subscribe the Network Jungle. Thank you.